CA just dropped one of their new Alpha Strike streams, giving us a more in-depth look at ranged combat. So here's all the main takeaways from that stream and my thoughts on them. So firstly, not really ranged related, but to do with characters, as they'll now have bodyguard units just like the good old days of Total War. So here you see a commissar, a sort of lord or hero, and he's surrounded by his men, his bodyguard unit, that are going to run around with him for the entire battle. Or here we see an orc warboss with 8 out of 10 in the unit, but later on we'll see him with 1 out of 10 and he's just by himself, so now he's become a single entity, but most of your powerful heroes will be accompanied by bodyguards, with the exception of some. More powerful beings or war machines could be a single entity, so there will still be some. But yeah, bodyguards for many lords and heroes. I personally really like this change. I like having a mixture of both rather than like Warhammer 3 where it's pretty much just single entities. This should be a welcome change, especially as you're able to customize the units. And that brings us to our next point, that you will have mixed gear on your units, which is customizable to your preference. So any single unit will have multiple weapons and they'll use what's appropriate for the target they're facing. So in this example here, in the top right here, you see a frag grenade get thrown and blow up a few infantrymen, but when they change to face the tank, they'll use a crack grenade instead, because a frag grenade's not really going to do anything to a tank, but a crack grenade will. Or here we see some guardsmen moving up, shooting with las guns assumedly, and as they get closer, they'll switch to flamers, all just by themselves. The player isn't doing this, so it's kind of automatic. They'll switch for the best weapon that they can use for the target they're facing. If they're going to face a tank, they'll whip out their missile launcher. If they're facing infantry, they'll whip out their flamethrower. If they should have both, of course. So all in all, this is cool and adds some versatility to the units, makes them adaptable to whatever they need to do. Although in the back of my head I do have to question the player's agency becoming automated, things that I could do as the player like switching weapons or choosing where and who to use grenades on, are done automatically. Although thinking about it, I guess that's not that different from Warhammer 3. Some units do have grenades and I don't get to choose who they throw them at, it's just whoever's in front of them and in range. So I guess it's not really different from Warhammer 3. I suppose it'll depend on how much I feel there is to do in a battle. If I've got plenty of stuff to micro and always be doing, I'm not going to want to be switching weapons, and that's going to be way too much micro to do that with like 20 or 40 units. But if I find myself sat around twiddling my thumbs with not a lot to do in the battle, it is going to feel like a bit of a problem. We'll have to see when we play it, I guess. And as your weapons are customizable, so is the unit as a whole. You can see here, this unit's made up of 16 Kassakin, 2 Voxcasters, 2 Sergeants, and 10 Kassakin Specialists. And what weapons they're all using, that's up to you. You can see here the Hotshot Lasgun used by the Kassakin and the Voxcasters. The plasma guns are being used by the 10 Specialists, the chainswords are being used by the Sergeants, so each different unit will have their different weapons, giving the unit an overall role. You can see the light, medium, heavy, it changes as we're going over the weapons. That's obviously showing what kind of units these weapons are going to be good against. And as you may have noticed, the next thing here, stats. We get to see a few more stats that are in the game. Before we only got to see the light, medium, heavy thing. Now we get to see accuracy, projectile armor piercing, range, projectile damage, rate of fire, explosion damage, explosion radius. All these stats, apparently there's more stats than ever before, and they largely seem to be tied to the weapons that are being used rather than the actual unit itself as a whole. And that goes for if they die. If all of your 10 plasma gunners die in this unit, well then you've got no more plasma capabilities. And that could bring some tactical moves to get rid of that unit. If you see all the plasma gunners bunched up, you could drop some artillery, aim it directly at them specifically, and maybe you'll just wipe out all their plasma gunners in one go. So this, of course, more like the tabletop, and I think overall it should be pretty cool to have that level of customization with all your individual units. Might make them feel a little bit more personal than just spamming out the same unit like we do in any other Total War, really. So yeah, good to see some more complicated stats, and overall it is sounding like the game is going to be just as complex, if not more, than, say, Warhammer 3. Now we also learned more about the cover system, as that is going to be a huge part of this ranged heavy game. Now we have seen before this little tooltip telling us what some cover does, plus 20% range resistance, 45% evasion, that's your ability to dodge ranged fire essentially, and 100% suppression resist. But until now we didn't really know what suppression was or what it did exactly. We could take some guesses, right, but now we know it does kind of what we expected. It will A, slow down a unit and make them move more slowly, but also slow their rate of fire, so their damage output is going to be less. That's what being suppressed does. There is light suppression and heavy suppression, so assumedly heavy will just be more of the same thing. And here you can see in this clip the difference between being in cover and not being in cover. These are two units of guardsmen both shooting at each other, but one is getting absolutely destroyed while the other one is doing pretty well behind its cover. So it's going to be very important for these kind of factions, these ranged heavy factions, to make good use of that cover to maximize their efficiency. And as we saw, cover provides a lot of bonuses. There is light cover and heavy cover, or better cover, I think. But that can be taken out. As you see here, the units are targeting this building to try and take it down, so the orcs don't have it as cover. They could have done that before the orcs arrived, so they had a cleaner shot. They could do it now when the orcs are inside the buildings and bring them down on them to kill some. It's also, of course, freeing up that line of sight to hit the orcs from different angles, maybe. So cover evidently is going to be a huge part of this game. Your positioning, your tactical use of that space. Or another cool thing is that you can create cover, or cover will be created with explosions and bombardments, things that leave craters in the ground. Those craters can provide cover and those buffed stats. Also, elevation, like in Warhammer 3, is going to be very advantageous. If you're higher up above the enemy, shooting down on them, you'll do a bit more damage and some other bonuses. So positioning yourself on that high ground is going to be pretty important. And so figuring out how to stop your enemy blasting you to pieces is also going to be a big part of the game. In this case here, you see Ogren charging in, smashing through the sandbags, smashing the men to pieces, and you can notice that while they are using their melee weapons in melee, some are still shooting occasionally, and that's something units are going to do when they're in melee. The ones at the front that can melee will melee, but if there's some a little further back with a little bit of space with a clean line of shot to somebody, they'll take that shot. So that's really nice and gives a much more natural feel to combat rather than people just stood there doing nothing. And of course, flanking is going to be ever important. You can see the words pop up here, light flanking, light suppression on these tanks. I assume that means they're taking those things and not inflicting those things, because they're kind of flanking somebody at the moment, but they are flanked themselves, so it could be either way. A couple of other little potential battle tactics. Strafing is now a thing. You're going to be able to strafe in different directions, walking backwards namely. So mostly this is going to be nice for moving backwards while still shooting and doing damage, so you can buy a bit more time to use your ranged weapons by strafing backwards. And different units will be better at this than others. Orcs, for example, probably won't be that great because they're not that accurate anyway, whereas Space Marines will be damn good at strafing, moving backwards while still accurately blasting their enemies. So yeah, this seems like a smaller thing, but I think it could have some real tactical advantage just to get that extra range damage done before the enemy gets a hold of you in melee. And of course, it's just a cool cinematic way to fall back as well. And we finally found out what that little radar is down in the bottom left corner. Sentry mode. When activated, selected units will not move to attack a ranged target if they are out of range. Instead, they will mark the target and prioritize shooting at it when it comes into range. So this is a really nice way to set up orders and pre-plan what you're going to shoot at, what you're going to prioritize as the enemy approaches you, and have the game just do it when they get there rather than you having to wait for the very second they walk into your range. So yeah, this should be really nice and help with the micro load. You can kind of plan things ahead and get ready for the incoming assault. Assumedly, the unit would still shoot at anything that comes into range if you have them on fire at will, but if that prioritized specific unit comes into range, they'll change to focus that one instead. Also, units will now kind of gain battle scars to tell a bit of a story of what happened to them in the battle. As we can see on this Baneblade tank, there's lots of bullet holes around, it looks a bit scorched, probably took some melee hits here and there, so it looks kind of battle weathered by the end of the battle rather than looking pristine as it probably did at the start. So that's pretty nice, and by the sounds of it, these will be persistent and will carry on to the next battle. The tank will look like this, and then it'll take some more hits, and then it'll look worse, I guess. Maybe you can fix it up, I don't know. And this is the same for all units, not just tanks. If they do survive their damage, guardsmen, not so good at that. But yeah, your soldiers, your army will tell a bit of a story. A small thing, but a nice touch. We also got to see more of the abilities or orders. Here you can see the regimental orders. You can pause if you want to read these. And then above that, the bombardments as well. So these are kind of like your army abilities that we have in Warhammer 3, just tied to either the regiment, just giving them some buffs to help everyone along, whether that's increasing their speed or their range damage. And then the bombardments, obviously, that's blowing stuff up in various ways. So using these effectively should be pretty important for helping you win your battles. And overall, there's just a massive ranged improvement to this game. In Warhammer 3, we have a lot of problems with line of sight and units not firing when they should, or taking ages to fire once you've got them stood still. Well, that should all be sorted now, especially as units' movement is now kind of independent from their shooting, and most units will be able to fire whilst moving. So you shouldn't have to wait around for them to all steady and line up. They'll be shooting while they're doing that anyway. And in terms of firing, it's all looking pretty natural. The first 2 or 3 rows will be able to shoot, but the ones at the back obviously won't be able to see over the ones' heads, and they can't shoot them in the back of the head, so they'll just have to wait their turn until there's some space to move forward, or until you pull the line a bit wider, and then more men will be able to get line of sight. And they also mentioned that the men around the back or around the sides will still be able to shoot stuff if it should happen to come around the back or sides, so they won't just stand there doing nothing. They will make themselves useful where possible. They also talked about how all the projectiles, the bullets, are actually projectiles in the game. They are there flying around as little entities that hit things and either do damage or do nothing. Which also means that other things that maybe aren't meant to be projectiles that turn into projectiles become projectiles. Like so, with all these storm boys, they go flying off in different directions, they'll crash into the ground, and if they were to hit your units, they damage them. If an orc battle wagon gets taken out, instead of just blowing up on the spot, it might veer off to the left, the right, straight ahead, and blow up there and do some extra damage that way, becoming essentially a projectile. Oh, and one must give a mention to the sweeping fire of the Baneblade. Sweeping fire is a new thing where it's just going to absolutely decimate this unit of boys. This is more just firing at a unit as a whole rather than an individual model. You see it in Warhammer 3 sometimes where your entire unit of missiles will shoot at one man in the enemy unit because he happens to be the closest because the unit is turned weird. And thus you end up with a lot of wasted ammunition. But with this kind of sweeping thing, you're going to be ensuring that you hit a lot more enemies if you've got this kind of capable weapon. So all in all, battles are looking like they're all about positioning, with the importance of cover and suppression and flanking and line of sight, creating line of sight, taking away cover, using cover, elevation, choke points. So in theory, it should be just as tactical or strategic as Total War Warhammer 3. With the units being so customizable though, I do wonder how it's going to feel using them to pick the right targets and get the right matchups. When they all kind of look the same on the unit card, there is a bit of information there to show you what's in the unit, but it's not terribly clear. And you know, you want to pick the right anti-armor unit, the right anti-large unit to deal with the appropriate targets to be the most efficient. So yeah, overall, still some cautious optimism for me for Total War 40k battles. Looking good. Gotta play it though. Gotta get some real time with it to really understand it, really get the feel for it. And I'm sure all of you are eager to do so as well. There is a closed beta. You can see the little QR code on the screen at various parts throughout this video. Yeah, otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this. Let me know how you're feeling about all this new information. Otherwise, I will see you in the future.